You're the principal and founder of BestBox Storage, BCM Management Partners, and Diversified Structure Solutions.
I tend to focus on the ground itself. In the end, is this a piece of ground that we would want to own forever? We raised $700,000. We borrowed $1.9 million. Ultimately got it sold for $4.9 million. I think for a period of time from COVID through maybe earlier this year, people gave customer service a break. I think what's going to separate companies is who's willing to take the time and effort to do the little things to improve customer service. That's going to leave everyone else behind.
Beau, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're the principal and founder of BestBox Storage, BCM Management Partners, and Diversified Structure Solutions. So 3 very different companies that have synergy between the 3 of them. Can you give me just a high level on what the 3 companies do?
Sure. And just one slight correction, co-founder of those. My partner, Matt Gravaglia, I would not want to leave him out of any discussion because really without him, none of it happens. So BestBox Storage is a joint venture between us and Keeley Properties based out of St. Louis, Missouri, where we develop, own, and operate self-storage facilities across the country. BCM Management is myself and Matt's development and real estate investing company that invests in both self-storage, industrial, and other commercial types of properties. And then Diversified Structure Solutions is a general contractor where we build both self-storage as well as other build-to-suit or other construction projects.
Apologies for leaving out your partner there.
No worries.
And thanks for the overview. So BestBox, one company, 40 self-storage facilities that you're developing. They're either built or under construction, located in 8 states, and 12 are open and operating, 15 under construction, the rest breaking ground next year in 2025. BCM owns 200,000 square feet of industrial space, 100,000 square feet of mixed-use commercial real estate, and over 200 acres of future development ground in 3 states. And then Diversified Structure Solutions, just an incredible amount of self-storage, 5,000 units you've built, a car wash, a C-store, 2 high-end tunnel car washes. These are just, in my opinion, incredible projects to be involved in, and any one of those projects would be amazing. And you're involved in hundreds, thousands. How do you handle that much? Is it a great team, your partner, something else?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to we're in great partnerships. So everything that we've done has always been a we versus an I, right? And so my partner, Matt, and I, we grew up together. We went to high school together, went to college together. He's one of my daughter's godfathers. I'm his daughter's godfather. And we really have a great balance of roles and responsibilities because for the most part, things that I'm not so good at, he's really good at, and things that he's not so good at, I'm good at, right? And so I would say we're partnership people. All of our deals are within some sort of partnership, whether it's, raising equity from an institution or a large endowment or a family office. And I would argue really anyone in real estate, your bank is your biggest partner, right? The bank has the most on the line. For most of the deals out there, your bank has the most capital at risk. And so we view all of our lenders as partners as well. And when you go into opportunities with that mentality, with that partnership mentality, you really want to perform at the highest level. And with performing at a high level on that many different types of opportunities, you got to deal with the good and the bad, right? And so when you're in a leadership role, you really want to be able to understand where you can offload some things that maybe you're not so good at.
You mentioned a really important piece there. You said that you grew up with your partner. So you and your partner have a high level of trust, but can you kind of give us some background on how you grew up and maybe how the both of you came up and where?
Yeah. So I grew up, pretty interesting is that I grew up in Franklin County, Missouri, out near Washington, in a small town called Villa Ridge, and we lived on 50 acres. My father and my mother both worked in St. Louis City. My mom worked at St. Louis University, and my dad owned a bar and restaurant in North St. Louis. So 4400 North Broadway, he opened Greg's Bar and Grill in 1975. So I lived in the country, but our primary business was in North City. And so I really, for a lot of my childhood, spent more time in North City than I did in Villa Ridge. In fact, in every Saturday from age 4 until about age 10, my dad, we would leave the country. He would drop us off at the Missouri Athletic Club for what was called a Saturday morning boys program. It wasn't very politically correct because back then they didn't allow women even at the club. And he would then, my grandpa would pick us up. My grandpa would then take us down to my dad's bar and we'd shoot pool and throw darts until about 10 o'clock at night while he was doing paperwork, and then he would bring us home to the country. So within that short period of time, I got to see really 3 different kind of ways of life, from country to the country club to the hood, and really embraced all of it. Really, I think for me was an important foundation to set of meeting and being comfortable around a lot of different people and learning how to take individuals as they come and earn their respect, but also be appropriately cautious when you need to, right? And so all of that plays a different way in each one of those settings, but it's important to experience all of that.
That's very fascinating. I don't think I've ever met anyone that had those 3 experiences at the same time growing up. So I'm sure it led to you becoming very well-rounded, like you were saying. With your dad being an entrepreneur, do you think that was the spark that kind of led to your entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, it really was. I learned a lot about what it takes to work for yourself and the amount of persistence that you really need to be successful, and also what it looks like to not be successful. I would say that over the years of being involved in different opportunities, you fall down a lot, right? And so I was unique in that I had someone in my father who was always there to talk me through it and kind of dust me off, right? And even if he wasn't or wasn't able to help financially, which oftentimes he wasn't, he was still there to kind of understand how tough it is to be in business for yourself. And I don't think people fully understand how hard it is sometimes to be in business and try to start something or try to get something open or try to get an occupancy permit and the office closes, all those little things that unless you've done that, you just don't understand what it takes.
It sounds like you're definitely speaking from experience when you say it can be extremely difficult, which I agree with, operating a business or being an entrepreneur. So before your 3 current extremely successful ventures, what other businesses were you involved in, or what was your first taste of the business world aside from your father's bar?
Yeah, so really, I would say right out of college, I started working for a small family business called Jaffe Lighting. And it was really a unique experience because it had been owned by the same family for over 100 years. And I was able to open a store for them in Columbia, Missouri. And, it was just a lighting store, right? So it was just selling to contractors. But what was really interesting to me is that I had contractors who they thought my last name was Jaffe. So they had me in their phone as Beau Jaffe. And I remember feeling really good about that because it made me feel like they thought that I was paying that close of attention to them, that this was my family's business. Like, why else would he be delivering me ceiling fans at 4 a.m. so that my electrician could install them if it wasn't his family's business? And so I felt a real sense of pride. Now, it wasn't enough to get a raise from them, but I felt like, that to me gave me a sense of what it would be like to kind of be a part of of your own business.
When you say you delivered ceiling fans at 4 a.m., for example. At that time, did you know you were going above and beyond, or was it just like you were so used to seeing the stuff you did with your dad and other family members, perhaps, that it just felt normal to go above and beyond?
Yeah, it just felt normal. I mean, that was always the expectations that my parents had for us. We wouldn't view that as above and beyond. We would view that as our responsibility. And whether it's a customer or a friend or a family member, the mentality is you do whatever it takes to get to that next step. My older brother is a physician. He was an All-American basketball player, a valedictorian in high school and college and medical school. My younger brother's top 10 in his law school class. I think when you aim to be very successful at something, even mediocre is really good, right? So I think that we were always taught to have high aspirations and really not let anything get in our way, because that's how you could ultimately become the most successful.
I'm going to butcher it, but that kind of sounds like that saying, if you aim for the stars, you'll still land on the moon, or something along those lines, which I think is a great way to go about life, to fully commit yourself and like you said, not really feel like you're going above and beyond. It's your responsibility to do the things that are on your plate. So when you were with Jaffe Lighting, was that simultaneously when you had your first experience in real estate, or was that perhaps after?
No, I wanted to. Even in college, I wanted to. I remember talking to my dad and my older brother, who were always more responsible, quote unquote, more responsible than I was. And I said, why don't we buy a duplex in Columbia and we'll live in one side and we'll rent out the other side. And I really think my brother just didn't want to do it because he didn't want to live with me, which was probably a good idea because I was a mess. But I felt like real estate to me was always very interesting. And, that really kind of, as I was involved in working with contractors and developers, that was that first kind of glimpse of that life. And I think more so than there's certainly successes monetarily that come from that, but I really was intrigued by the flexibility and I would say, like, a lot of good real estate people are pretty ADD, right? We kind of 3 inches deep and a mile wide. And so I thought, well, this is a profession that kind of plays well into that, because one day you're talking to a civil engineer and the next day you're talking to an architect and the next day you're talking to an attorney, and then you're doing your books with your accountant, and you got to know a little bit about everything, right? And you're problem solving the whole way. And so I think that really gave me that first glimpse. I just didn't have any money, right? So I had to figure the money thing out before I could really get involved.
And how did you eventually figure the money thing out?
So like a lot of people, I after Jaffe Lighting, I did pharmaceutical sales, which was great because it was finally a decent paycheck, and I had a company car. I thought that was great. And really, it's interesting because I started off by saying I would go down to the Missouri Athletic Club in the mornings. Well, as soon as I got back to St. Louis, I joined as a associate junior member at the Missouri Athletic Club downtown, and this was in 2005. And downtown Washington Avenue was really kind of getting going, and it had a few years of good traction, but it was really going. And I joined a basketball league down there and was able to be around a lot of the developers that were doing loft projects downtown. And my goal was to just be around it. And I thought that, if I could find an opportunity to somehow roll my sleeves up and put some sweat into a deal, that I could finally kind of be a part of it, And so I was able to find, although it was less glamorous than the lofts downtown, I was able to find a 4-family on Pernod in South St. Louis City that myself, one guy who had money, who was a developer, and 2 other guys that didn't have any money, bought this 4-family and overpaid for it. 2006, overpaid for it, overbuilt it, rented it for less. And there wasn't a mistake that wasn't made. And but it was my first kind of glimpse at real estate ownership.
I think a good thing when folks start with a smaller property and make all the mistakes with the smaller property, because I feel like to a certain extent mistakes are inevitable. So it's kind of better to learn on something where the stakes are not as high. Although I'm sure it stung when the deal didn't go as you expected.
Yeah.
So after that deal, you moved on to another. Was it another smaller deal again?
Yeah, we bought a property in the Grove. That was it was a two-way radio repair shop. As you can imagine, those were going out of favor by then. And former gas station, we bought it. We didn't understand the environmental issues. Over the course of 7 years, kind of got educated in that entire process. I wouldn't call that a success. And then that led to really our entrance into self-storage, because one of the guys that we partnered with, or that I partnered with, he owned some buildings on Washington Avenue. And I remember it was 2007. He said, somebody called me about doing storage in one of our buildings. And I was the type that if I heard something and someone, didn't want to take the ball and run with it, I said, well, I'll run with it. Let me talk to him and meet him. And so I met a guy, and we talked all about storage for days and days. And I thought, this is really an interesting asset class. Like I thought this could be something that would work. And I think the loft district, nobody has closets, and this is perfect, And so that was 2008 that we bought a building just north of Washington Avenue, and we thought, well, this will be a home run. We're right by all these lofts, and all we got to do is put in these 5x10 and 10x10 metal boxes, and we'll fill up in 30 days, and the rest will be history. That's the exact opposite of what happened. We bought it. And sometimes if I talk to lenders about projects that we're doing now, and they say, well, how have you learned anything about storage? I say, well, I've made every mistake possible. And so now that you've made all the mistakes, like, the rest is all upside. And it's really from that one facility. I mean, all of the little nuances that make a storage property successful, as far as unit mix and loading zones and well lit and secure and safe and well located. This one got them all wrong. And so
what were some of those mistakes? Because from what you said, it seems like it was well located, with it being close to the lofts on Washington Avenue.
It was close, but it was 2 blocks north. And as we all know in St. Louis, unfortunately, as you move north, you start to move to areas of town that people who live in the loft district don't feel comfortable going. So you have to understand there's barriers. Sometimes it's a highway, sometimes it's a river. You may say, well, I'm just across the river from that big population center. Well, people don't like to cross rivers to do business. They want to do it on their side of the river. So you have to really understand those little sub-market nuances, because not everything's a 1 mile or a 3 mile circle, right? Sometimes it's it's an oblong shape that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I find with folks that are not from the St. Louis region, that type of nuance keeps them either from investing in the St. Louis region or getting into deals that perhaps a local wouldn't get into, at least in the apartment world. I'm not sure if it's like that in the self-storage world or some of the other real estate classes that you're involved in. But I've seen that definitely in the apartment space, especially when it comes to apartment product in North County, for example, where you can look at the 3 mile radius and say, hey, there's some large employers that are not far from here, but it doesn't tell you the full picture.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, that's why, there's a lot of people that look at real estate via Google Earth and through a spreadsheet, and that doesn't work. You have to get to the site, you have to drive around, you have to see what direction people go to work and what they come back to work. Do they live around there? What are the schools like around there? To really understand a trade area, you really have to see where the local traffic goes versus where the transient traffic goes, and understanding those nuances is really important.
While you were working on this self-storage deal, and learning from your mistakes. Were you married at the time or were you single? And also, were you paying your bills from these real estate deals or did you have something else going on?
Yeah, so I was married and still am, thankfully, although it was a close call back then for sure. Married, and my wife worked as a dietitian. Probably can't tell from the cameras, but she's a registered dietitian. And then my day job was that one of the individuals that I partnered with, he was involved still is, in the auto warranty space. And so I joined that group to help him in business development during the day and then work on real estate at night. That worked pretty well until both of those things worked okay until the recession hit. And ultimately, the warranty business and a partnership that he was involved in kind of split. And I made the decision to stick with him and become more of a COO for that business, which was really out of my kind of comfort zone. It was a call center sales organization that just wasn't something that I had ever done. But he had certainly shown a tremendous amount of loyalty to me in letting me get involved in some real estate deals. And so I felt a sense of loyalty to him to stick with him through this. It was very, very tough. And part of that was, there are times when, I always viewed it as the last people to get paid are the owners. And for a while, there was a lot of time when everyone got paid except for us. And so through that time period, it was really challenging. At that point, we had 2 kids, and there was a lot of times when the credit cards were maxed out and the 401k was all burned up, and that's until you have that feeling of not knowing how you're going to kind of put 2 nickels together or bouncing checks. It's tough, and it's a gut check as far as, are you doing the right thing? Are you making the right decision for your family? Again, I'd say that's where partnership comes into play. My brothers are people that have always, as they've progressed in their careers, have always been involved in opportunities that have come together for myself and my partner. And, part of that is, it's kind of like a basketball team, right? It's like there's your leading scorer, and then there's that guy who comes off the bench to hit the big shot. You never know, what's more important, the first 80 points or the last 2 that win the game, and so building your team around you and building your network of partners is really important, because you never know when you might need to call on somebody to come in and hit a big shot.
Or maybe you need that 3-and-D specialist to come in and play some good defense and protect you.
That's right. That's right.
So that self-storage deal, that was your 3rd real estate deal and one that didn't go as you planned. But after that, you had a deal that you worked on that was kind of your big break, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So we found an old Schnucks grocery store in Jennings, Missouri, right at the corner of West Florissant and Jennings Station Road. It was 2014, 2015. It was about 2 miles from where the riots had occurred for Michael Brown, where they had burned down part of another storage facility. And I thought we were getting this building dirt cheap, which we were. There was a reason why we were. People really thought we were crazy for, one, investing not really as much money, but time in that part of town. I'll say, I think, my experience with North St. Louis was that there's opportunities, and oftentimes, people, they don't take advantage of those opportunities because they're scared, right? And so it wasn't an environment that made me anxious or nervous. I felt confident that we were going to be into the deal for the right number, and we were able to create value. So I went around and passed the hat with a bunch of my brothers and my friends of mine and friends of my brothers, and we raised $700,000 and we borrowed $1.9 million. So by the end, we were into the deal for 2.6, got it built, which was, we took a old Schnucks and we put which is a grocery store, and we put a second floor within the building, so a mezzanine, put in an elevator, and ultimately got it sold to a group out of California for $4.9 million after 16 months of ownership. So that was a big win. It was a win I needed. I literally was, the next month, I don't think I would have had my Amex bill paid.
Wow, that's incredible. And that's an amazing return. I mean, I don't know what that IRR would look like, but it just you hit it out of the park with that deal.
Yeah.
So to go from a deal like that, where you said you're passing the hat around to raise money, to today, one of your investors is the largest university endowment in the world. How does that happen in 7 or 8 years? Clearly, it's, I think, the fact that you're so tenacious, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And also, like you said, entrepreneurs are kind of problem solvers. You clearly had a lot of problems that were coming your way, and you figured out a way to get around them. But what else would you kind of attribute it to, the level of success that you've had?
I think that part of it is myself and my partner, we want to have a seat at the table. So we want to get a seat at the table, you got to figure out how to get yourself in the door. And then you got to figure out how to get up to the table. And then you got to figure out how you can have a say in what's going on. And that's a process involved in relationships, whether it's a partnership or a bank or maybe it's a vendor that you're working with. How do you get to, my dad was in sales a lot, and how do you get to the grinder? How do you get to the person making the decision? And some of that is playing the long game of, hey, I'm going to spend some time doing some things that aren't real profitable, but they get me a lot of exposure to a certain group of people that can maybe get me into the door the next time when something comes about. And so, I think a lot of it is just listening and asking a lot of questions. I think that's one thing that's often misunderstood. They say, well, is so-and-so, are they smart? And I was like, well, they're smart enough to ask a lot of questions. And I think asking questions is kind of like the difference maker between really smart people ask a lot of questions, because it enables them to understand what the person across from them is thinking, working towards, and really takes them to that next level of working together.
Is it safe to say then that you don't think there's a such thing as a stupid question?
Zero. Yeah. One time when I was little, my uncle said, Beau, why do you ask so many questions? And I said, because I don't know nothing. And it's true. I really,
That's a level of, I think, humility and just the ability to be humble that can truly be a superpower if you're willing to step into any situation like you're not the smartest person in the room. Whether you are or not, I think is irrelevant. But that's something that I try to keep in mind as well, and it's helped me as it's clearly helped you as well.
Yeah.
So self-storage is the specialty. You're involved in a couple of other things, but self-storage, BestBox is what you're most known for. How did that partnership or that idea come about with Keeley Partners?
Yeah. So after my partner Matt and I had worked on a institutional partnership, we had a positive outcome on some of those deals, and we took that time, that was right around when COVID hit, to work on building out a pipeline of self-storage properties. We saw the value in consolidating a portfolio. It's an asset class that as it becomes more mature, a lot of institutional investors want to place capital into it, but most of the individual properties are small sizes, and institutional capital likes to write big checks. And so to write big checks, you have to consolidate a lot of properties. And so we were able to work on putting a portfolio together, and at that point, really kind of went out and looked for the right partner, and trying to understand from both a capital standpoint as well as, do they look at things the way we look at things? Do they value things the way we value things? And not as much from a underwriting standpoint as more from an integrity standpoint and what means something to them. And Keeley Properties, run by Jason Braidwood and Rusty Keeley, had really a shared culture and vision of treating people the right way. That's employees to partners to subcontractors to customers, that really aligned with myself and Matt's goals of doing it the right way. A lot of times in real estate, I call them like the 100 to nothing people. Like there's people who expect to get 100 and everyone else gets 0, right? And a lot of times those people get called shrewd. So people say like, oh, he's shrewd. And I'm like, well, explain to me explain shrewd. And they explain it. And I said, kind of sounds like an asshole. Like, it doesn't sound like he's shrewd. So don't call me shrewd ever, right? I'd rather just be nice. And I think it's okay to win, but it's also okay if the other guy wins a little bit too. And so I just think if you go into it with a mentality of I get 100 and everyone else gets 0, that's going to work sometimes. But I think that you're not going to be able to scale appropriately. It's like my dad used to tell me, he'd say, don't be afraid to hit some singles and doubles, because if all you do is hit home runs, you're going to miss a lot, and sooner or later someone's going to put one right into your ear hole. But when you're hitting singles and doubles, loading the bases, and that really speaks to diversification. It speaks to looking at things from the perspective of how do we make, as many people involved in this successful as possible.
That's a great way of looking at it. I really think in a country like the U.S. where there's an abundance of opportunity, having that type of win-win mentality is extremely important, because the pie is big enough for all of us to get a slice versus, like you said, someone needing 100% of it. So I fully agree with that. And I can see it just from our short time that we've spent together here. You come across as very kind and humble. And I'll never forget, I drove by on 64 where you guys have your BestBox headquarters flag, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I sent you a message right away on LinkedIn, because when I looked up BestBox, I had never seen a company try to market self-storage like it's this cool, just the vibe you guys are giving out versus this is a box, you can pay this much to rent the box, right?
Yeah.
So I sent you a message and you got back to me maybe the same day or the next day. And that type of small gesture means a lot as well, I think. Just responding to people, being quick to respond, not thinking that you're, too above a response to even a kind message. I think it really speaks to someone's character.
Well, I'll tell you too, one thing, the making storage sexy, I have to give 100% credit to Rusty Keeley, because that is Rusty. His vision is to make storage sexy. I didn't know if it could be done, so I'm glad to hear that it resonated with you. I think it's all the little things. I think I think in this day and age and in this world, we make things really complicated, right? And it really, in the end, is not that complicated. Do what you say you're going to do. Be nice to people. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Say please. Say thank you. We want to add all these layers of complexity, and I think that it just muddies the water so many times. I think what separates good from great isn't some unbelievable act. It's usually just something real little, and it's that real little thing that sets you apart from that other person or that other opportunity. But it's very often it's the little things that separate, again, that good from great. It's not the big thing. That's an important thing that I focus on with my kids, and on the personal side, my youngest, my daughter has Down syndrome. And what I learned from her every day is that she really is an expert at focusing on the little things. She's an expert at not letting stuff that doesn't matter matter. She doesn't let it matter, right? And I think that she's smarter than all of us because all of us bring in all this extra stuff and it clouds all of our judgment. It makes us spend all this time on things that really don't matter. And she spends time on things that matters. And she's really a blessing that I learn from every day.
Your daughter's diagnosis also led you to get involved in some charitable or nonprofit work in the St. Louis region as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very involved in the St. Louis Down Syndrome Association, which I'm on the board of. And then my wife and I are on the board of an organization called One Classroom, which is an organization which supports Catholic schools in St. Louis that are educating through inclusive education, children with disabilities. So it's great. St. Louis has a large Catholic school system. We've been blessed to be in a wonderful parish, in a wonderful school. And our daughter Isabel has been in that school since preschool, along with our 8th grader Hope and our now sophomore in high school Albert. But they were all in school together. And One Classroom supports the Catholic grade schools through grants and teacher resources so that they can educate kids with disabilities.
That's great to hear. And it's also good to hear that organizations like that exist. Just going back to what you said a few moments ago, you mentioned doing the small things and that being what separates good from great. What are some of the small things that you're doing at BestBox or at one of your other companies that is allowing for you to have the success you have? I think you kind of touched on it in self-storage. You mentioned well-lit facilities and things along those lines. Is that what you would classify as some of the small things that you do over and over?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, little things like having music playing in your facilities. I mean, people think that a storage facility is listen, most of the time when you're at a storage facility, nobody likes to move. Moving is really pretty unpleasant. And so if your facility can smell nice, can have nice music, can be well lit, your drive aisles are really wide so that a car isn't behind you or honking their horn or flashing their lights. Those little things are what make a difference for a customer. And it's more expensive to do, right? So if you put your buildings closer together, you pour less concrete. But the trade-off is that you have a worse customer experience. And our objective is that even though a customer is going through something that might be unfortunate. So the 3 biggest drivers for demand of storage are death, divorce, and displacement. None of those are overly pleasant experiences, right? But if our manager can greet a customer the right way, if our facility is well lit and clean and safe and secure, then maybe that has an opportunity to improve that person's day because maybe it didn't start off so great. We think that those little things can really make a big difference when it comes to their experience at our facilities.
When you say safe and secure, I'm assuming you mean cameras and secured access?
Yeah. So cameras, secured access, a gate system that recognizes license plates and recognizes customer accounts and, just kind of takes that little extra step.
That makes sense. I think another thing that would be important is location. Like you probably don't want to be on some back road that has very little traffic. Does that play into where you're located as well, just being in a safe, heavily trafficked road?
Yeah, so self-storage, 35, 40 years ago was really kind of thought of as a land bank situation where it's on the outskirts of town and it's chain link fence and barbed wire and gravel. It's transitioned into much more of a retail, commercial type business that really we want to be where everybody else wants to be. We want to be at Main and Main. We want to be highly visible, easily accessible. Now, municipalities don't always want us there because we don't generate a lot of sales tax. But our counter to that is that we're oftentimes serving small businesses, independent businesses as their kind of just-in-time storage and warehousing needs. And so we do make a positive impact on the the economic driver for the community. Harder to measure, admittedly, but in the end, 1 in 10 households utilize self-storage. So we're an amenity that communities and growing communities especially need.
I never would have thought it's 1 in 10. I knew it was a high number, but that sounds a lot higher than I thought it was. Do you have any thoughts long term? Like, just me personally, when I think about self-storage, if I'm thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road, I think about changing consumer behavior. Are people buying less because, maybe your phone replaced your television and your pool table and your arcade system? Or are people buying less because now you're living in smaller spaces because housing is less affordable? Do you think about 10, 20 years down the road when you're building a facility, or are you kind of a short-term holder and you're not worried about that longer-term picture?
No, we always think long-term. I mean, I'll say that it's been interesting to see how utilization from baby boomers to millennials to Gen X hasn't changed that much. The same percentage, if not a little bit more, utilization. So now the asset class itself is a very U.S. asset class. So I'll use round numbers. They're not 100% right, but if there's 90,000 storage facilities in the world, about 80,000 of them are in the U.S., 5,000 are in Canada, and then the other 5,000 are everywhere else. So it's a very U.S. Consumer product type. The other thing that lends that is in the U.S., we have big cars. We like to go shopping at Costco and Sam's and buy in bulk, and we hold on to things, right? And so I don't necessarily know. I mean, that will certainly change. I think that's 50, 75, 100 years from now. Maybe as you see in Europe, where things become much more urban-centric and less vehicles and more walking, I think we still have a lot of room to grow in the United States. If you go down to Dallas, Fort Worth, or Houston, or Phoenix, or Denver, there's still a lot of ground to grow in those areas.
That's a great point. I think when I start to think the way I was mentioning, it's when I'm influenced by my European or Canadian relatives that don't fully understand the American consumer. I think it's hard to wrap your head around unless, you're here and you're living and breathing it. So when we're talking about, BestBox building a new facility, first of all, do you only build or do you also buy?
No, we'll acquire existing facilities as well.
And when you acquire, I'm assuming there needs to be a value add component.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're looking to buy or build, let's say a broker brings a deal across your desk, it's a piece of ground. Let's say there's an existing facility with the ability to build some more units. What are you looking at first, or how are you starting to evaluate that?
Yeah, so this is when a great partnership comes into play, because I think there's the data approach to it of how many square feet per capita, what are your incomes in the area, how many vehicles per day. There's all the hard data that goes into underwriting a deal. And then there's the ground itself, right? And kind of understanding where you are within the submarket. And I tend to focus on the ground itself. So if we get kind of a lead on an opportunity, I, within a week or two, fly there, wherever it is, and I spend a day just driving around the market to try to understand how the market's growing, what type of businesses are in the market, maybe where a new school was built. Schools can be good indicators of kind of where the population is growing. So look to see where the new schools are. Look to see how traffic flows in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, really understand, in the end, is this a piece of ground that we would want to own forever, right? So you said earlier, short-term or long-term. I think from a real estate perspective, you always want to say, is this ground I want to own forever? Because even if you acquire it and you get permitted, if you've gone through the Great Recession, you can see how the rug can be pulled out of you at an instant, right? You always want to be prepared to adapt. And so what's your backup plan? What's your backup to your backup? Are you going to be okay holding this ground for a period of time? And you want to be able to say yes to that, because you want to say, you know what, it didn't work. What I wanted to do, I couldn't get financed. It didn't work. My partner dropped out, or this happened. But this is a good piece of ground that I can carry for a certain period of time. And I believe that there's 10 other uses that might work here. And so I would always lean towards buying better ground, paying more for better ground than just trying to get a deal somewhere, because you get what you pay for.
That makes sense. So you're buying quality, and a lot of your team is looking at the underwriting to tell you if it's a go or not. You're visiting the market. You're wrapping your head around where that ground is situated in that submarket and where the potential growth is and opportunity. And let's say if you want to move forward, you're under contract, the seller has accepted your offer. What's your next move once you're under contract?
Yeah, so then at that point, we're continually underwriting through comps. And then, I would say now more so than 5 years ago, you are on a daily basis trying to understand your hard cost on construction, because since COVID started, construction and construction costs have been it's a ride, right? Not only from a supply standpoint for if it's going to be there, but from a pricing standpoint. They're gone are the days when you can get a bid on something and that bid is good for more than about 30 seconds. So you're really the entire time trying to understand, where are my hard costs going to be in? 9 times out of 10, we have to rezone or go through an entitlement process. As I said before, not everybody wants self-storage where we want it. So that process can be pretty long and challenging, and public meetings and working with local municipalities to figure out how we can get our use approved. And so the whole time we're doing that, we're also measuring the comps in the market to see, are the rates holding to where we think they need to be holding so that we can afford to build the project that we want to build. It is a challenge. It's been even more challenging the past year and a half with interest rates going up the way they are. And, you're constantly reevaluating the deals, right? And so, but once we feel like we've got a good pro forma for how we could see 5 years of lease up in a property, at that point we work with our lenders to figure out which lender will be the best for that project, so that we're prepared to close at that time. Self-storage we're the tortoise. We don't, the day you open, you're empty. The second day you might be empty. The third day you hope you get a customer, right? And so getting lenders to understand that process, that it's not a fast-paced lease up, that it's slow and steady, that can be a challenge. But we're in a great market with some very strong lenders that understand the asset class, and we've really been blessed to be able to find some both great partners like Keeley Properties and also some great lenders in the market.
I'm assuming those lenders are primarily community banks. Is that right? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That was my understanding for self-storage in terms of the lending options. In multifamily, of course, you have various options, whether it's CMBS, Lifeco, Fannie, Freddie, HUD. But my understanding for self-storage was that the community banks are kind of the way to go because they really understand that particular
Yeah,
submarket.
the community banks are good. I mean, because it has a slow lease up, it fits better with a community or a mid-size regional lender. Now, once you have a stabilized portfolio, the options start to be similar. So Lifeco, CMBS, it's just they would like to see a more stabilized product. They view that lease up as a risk. And so absorbing that risk is they feel better suited for a smaller lender. The benefit of self-storage is that during inflationary times, our leases are all month to month. And so as costs are increasing, we're able to pass those costs on a monthly basis versus maybe a tenant being stuck in a 1-year or a 5-year lease where those cost increases can't be passed on.
Do you guys also employ dynamic pricing then for new renters coming in?
We do. We do. Yeah. So our prices are changing hourly based upon market data, based upon input from our management team. We use an algorithm system through a third party that helps us constantly be reviewing rates to make sure that we're meeting the market or beating the market in the case of wanting to lease a property up.
Going back to, the hypothetical we were talking about, if you get the entitlements and you get your pricing and everything looks like a go, do you have a prototype that you like to build, or is it just all dependent on a particular site?
The goal has always been to have a prototype, and it never works. So, with storage, because we're kind of a redheaded stepkid, we're always dealing with triangles and weird odd lots, and because we always try to wedge ourselves into where nobody wants us. And so because of that, we're always dealing with shapes that are just different. It makes it challenging. It's why it's not for everybody. That's what's kind of fun about it, is every project is independent and individual, and you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. But that's the other thing of understanding a market too, because you're trying to understand what type of facility are you going to bring into that submarket. Some need more climate controlled, some need more non-climate controlled, some need more larger units, some need more smaller units. So that's where you really get into the nuances of what a market really needs, is really undersupplied in. And we want to satisfy that supply, and we want to do it at a very high level, because ultimately we want to charge a premium for our product, right? So we want to take what a lot of times is a commodity and add great service and add a great facility to this commodity so that we can charge a premium for it.
That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are willing and able to pay for a higher level of customer service, which it sounds like you place an emphasis on.
And I think too that that's going to be even more important over the next 5 to 10 years. I think for a period of time from COVID through maybe earlier this year, people gave customer service a break. They kind of said, you know what, everyone's going through something. You don't need to have good customer service as long as it shows up, right? As long as my meal gets to the table, as long as it gets delivered to my doorstep, that's good enough. Well, I think what's going to separate companies is who's willing to take the time and effort to do the little things to improve customer service. That's going to leave everyone else behind. Because in the end, people want to do business with companies and people that make them feel good and make them feel appreciated. And that's not a grand task. That's a please. That's a thank you. That's a I'm sorry it didn't work out the way it was supposed to. That's a good lighting. It's the little things.
That I agree, and it's similar in the apartment world. So like our leasing team, for example, is both local and remote in the Philippines. And what our property manager did was she sent everyone a mirror and with a note that just said, don't forget to look at the mirror and smile when you answer the phone. So just the little things. And it's a part of the reason why Chick-fil-A, for example, it always has a line in the drive-thru, because they're polite. They do the little things, and they do it well. When you mentioned the little things in self-storage, it's of course the customer service, all the things we touched on. But does that also apply to the construction component? Like, for example, are you choosing a certain type of siding or roof material because that little detail will allow your building to, avoid higher maintenance costs? Or are there any factors like that you're considering?
Yeah, I mean, that we're always trying to look for a product that's going to be reliable, and also that's going to be have the right appearance, right? So we want to stand out. We want people to notice what we are. We want people to see where they do business. So how do you make your office stand out? We do that through bright, vibrant colors and a lot of hot pinks and blues, and we have a great marketing team that really focuses on making it pop, so that again, you want customers to see where they can do business and to see that it's a storage facility, right? And so you can only put so many signs up, but what you can do is through architectural features and through different product, you can draw customers' eyes to the sign or to the office or to the loading area so that they understand, hey, when I need storage, that's where I go. I drive by it all the time. I see it. Now I need it. So that's really our goal.
I saw that you guys also have, I think, 4.5 stars and up on Google for all of your facilities. Is that another emphasis that you place on your team?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, we all know that online presence and reputation is just it's monumental now in every business, but especially a business like ours where, it used to be to stand out in self-storage, you named your storage facility AAAA self-storage so that you showed up first in the yellow pages. That wasn't that long ago. That was about 15 years ago, maybe less. And before COVID hit, only one of the publicly traded REITs in self-storage did online rentals, just one. Now, the largest self-storage facility, which is Public Storage, the orange doors, over 50% of their rentals are done online. So 4 years ago, 0, now 50%. So it just shows how important it is to that your reputation is not just at point of service, but also online and what customers are saying about you. And, again, people a lot of times want to make it very complicated, and it's not as complicated as people might think.
Just on a high level, like if I was a customer at a BestBox facility, if I lease a unit online and then I show up to the facility, what can I expect? Will there be a lock in the unit? Will I already have the code?
Yeah, so one thing we do that's pretty interesting and I think a nice touch is we put together a box which fits with our name, right? BestBox. And it's a swag box. So you've got a lock, you've got a keychain. Now, here's a learning experience. We started with some chocolate. Chocolate doesn't work real well when it's hot out in Texas, right? So that was an oops. Maybe a pair of socks that are bright and pink and say BestBox on them, a review card, and then, how to get hold of the manager, who the manager is, and it comes in a real bright box so that when you open your unit, it's kind of a little welcome gift. So that's something that sets us apart.
That's awesome. That's very similar to what we do in the apartment world, having a little gift for the resident. But I've never heard of anyone doing that in the self-storage world. So what I'm kind of the pattern I'm seeing is in the apartment space, we borrow a little from hospitality, and it seems like the front runners in the storage space borrow a little bit from the apartment world. Even in the marketing, for example, like the BestBox marketing that we talked about is very similar to what you'd expect from a new Class A urban apartment community that's trying to attract residents.
A lot of that comes from, and one of the main reasons we wanted to partner with Keeley Properties is that they are an apartment developer. They've developed a ton of high-end communities across St. Louis and other markets. And so we felt like we wanted to take a lot of the great experience that they have in that market, coupled with our experience in the self-storage market, and can really create this BestBox brand that could really transcend a number of different, attributes for not just a run-of-the-mill self-storage product. Now, I will also have to, the one thing I miss giving credit for is that the name BestBox Storage was created by my brother, Jason. So he was the one who came up with that.
Well, Jason, if you're listening, that was a great idea. Since 2008, you've been involved in the deployment of over $200 million in equity, just under $1 billion in total deal capital. What's next for you? What's next for your three companies or you personally?
Yeah, I think we're in probably the third inning of the BestBox development platform. We've recently taken a second equity partner within that platform, Artemis Real Estate Partners out of Washington, D.C. That's going to enable us to take the platform to the next level. And, we're carefully watching the markets to understand when the right opportunity is to start an acquisition strategy versus purely a development strategy. And we think that time is going to be pretty soon to where we can start to acquire some value add and maybe some deals that aren't doing what they were supposed to do. And so we're really we're building just a tremendous foundation to be able to grow BestBox for years to come. So I don't see us slowing down at all. I see us executing on the current strategy, and then kind of repositioning ourselves to add existing facilities onto that platform.
That makes a lot of sense. We're kind of in a similar boat in terms of waiting for opportunities. We think they'll come. I'm 100% certain they'll come in both the self-storage and apartment world. It's just a matter of when and being ready for those opportunities so you can capitalize on them. So before we start to wrap up the show, I do have one question it's related, but it's also kind of not related. The largest university endowment in the world. How did that connection happen, and how did you get involved with, or how did they get involved with you?
So again, this is where North St. Louis comes into play. We were in the middle of our development in the old Schnucks on Jennings Station Road, and the general contractor we were using at the time sent me a picture of a business card, and it was a storage group out of Memphis, Tennessee, a guy by the name of Pete Williams, who's a mentor, a tremendous guy. And he said, hey, this guy stopped by the job site and was asking questions about this site and asking questions about other sites that he was looking at to develop storage. And I Googled him, and he's been in storage forever. He's developed a ton of stuff. And I'm like, oh man, if this guy's going to start developing in St. Louis, like we're never, he's going to take all the good sites. I said, well, we'd rather work with him than against him. So I called him, and I introduced myself. I introduced who we were and what we were doing. We had a great visit, and he said, well, hey, I'm going to be up in St. Louis next week. You want to drive around and look at some sites? And like any real estate, if all we could do is drive around and look at sites, that's like heaven, right? So we met with them. We talked about our site in Jennings, and he said, well, what's next? And I said, well, do you want to go drive around? So we drove around and looked at a few other sites that we had under contract. And he's like, he said, well, how are you raising money for all of this? Or how are you capitalizing it? I said, well, honestly, I hope this one works so that we can roll some of it into the new one. And then I hope some of the guys that put money into this one want to put money into the new ones. And if not, then I'm going to try to find some other guys to do it, kind of pass the hat around. And he said, well, what if I could find all the money for you, and all you got to do is worry about getting sites and building? I said, well, that would be great. So long story short, he had been the preferred national storage developer for this endowment, and we were able to get an allocation of $20 million to develop 6 sites within the St. Louis area. And to this day, we talk and work with that same group on different opportunities.
That's incredible. I think it really speaks to your ability to say yes to opportunities, whether it's a meeting or whether it's just taking a chance or a risk on someone. So very much appreciate you sharing that. That was one thing that really stood out to me because you don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
So the way
you should see the operating agreement to do a deal with them.
I bet.
Yeah.
How long does it take to do a deal with someone like that? Would you say it's a few months or?
Oh no, it's more like almost a year. Yeah.
Makes sense. I bet there's a ton of red tape on their end.
Yeah.
We like to end each show with what we call a hole-in-one, which is just your top advice for someone that they can implement today into either their life or their business. Do you have any advice or insight that you can share?
Yeah, I think fear gets in the way of a lot of decisions, right? So we're afraid to fail, or we're maybe afraid to be successful, or afraid to do something that one of our friends might make fun of us for, or not look a certain way to certain people. And I think that we have to set that fear aside and try to figure out how we can be great and how we can be a winner today, right? And I think that for so long, whether it was real estate or something else, I'd hear people say like, well, if it was such a good idea, someone would have already done it already. And that is such a loser's mentality. There's so many great deals and great ideas that weren't the first of whatever it was, right? The iPhone wasn't the first cell phone, but it's the best. Even though I won't use it, I only use Samsung. But I think that it's about putting that fear aside, checking that fear at the door, and really the only way you can do that is when you have, I call it the 3 Fs: faith, family, and friends. When you've got faith, family, and friends on your side, you're pretty hard to stop. And when you focus on the things that matter and surround yourself with great people, then you can be great. There's no room to be afraid of anything, and you fall down. My son and I, we have this, there's a Chinese proverb that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I think that really rings true. We live in a country where you can fall down, you can make mistakes, but you can get up and you can dust yourself off and you can work really hard and you can be successful. Now, the true measurement of success is, can you reach back and help someone else up, right? So don't forget that you fell down. You probably didn't get up on your own. Somebody probably helped you up. I find it funny when people say they're self-made, right? Nobody's self-made. We're God-made. We're family-made. We're friends-made. We all have this support group that's there for us. And it's our responsibility as we become more successful to reach back and help someone else become successful. Because if we're constantly doing that, each one reach one, then things can get a lot better in a lot of different areas.
Thanks for sharing, Beau. That really resonated with me, and I think similarly. How can people learn more about you or your company if they're inclined to do so?
Yeah, go to bestboxstorage.com. We'd certainly love to have new customers who need things stored. We're in Missouri, Montana, Colorado, Arizona, Texas, coming soon to North Carolina, facilities in Florida. And we're always looking for new opportunities that might come about. So that's certainly the best way.
Sounds good. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.